Cycling for me has never been about the bikes. They've only ever been the prerequisite tool. I do not see just a bike race, I see riders on heroic journeys and warriors doing battle. At one point, cycling was the most popular sport in Europe because newspapers told magnificent tales about epic races and crafted the great champions into legends. But with the advent of television, cycling lost some of its mystique, and that golden age of journalism and narration has perished. So now let us try to return some romance to the beautiful sport. Let us praise and give glory to phenomenal performances to be remembered for decades to come. Let us dwell on the moments that inspire and move us. Let us chronicle the rise and fall of heroes. Let us chart these life-changing journeys, these cycling odysseys. All right. We are back for another year of the Cycling Odysseys. I'm your host, Patrick Santino. Oh boy, where to start? So, this is season 2. We're starting the 4 days of introduction again. If you listened last year, which is doubtful because the audience was very small, even though it's also still very small. This will be a repeat, but anyways, this is to set the tone, set the purpose basically for the whole point of the show, what I'm trying to do with it. So I'm going to repost the 4 days of introduction. The first day is the best, I would have to say, personally. And I re-recorded this year because I listened to it last year because I was wondering how did I have 4 days of stuff? And so the first day, the recording wasn't up to snuff. I felt I could definitely do better. I practiced, my reading aloud skills and everything. So I went at it. And so, yeah, we got a beefed up reading of it again. Maybe you'll enjoy it more. Or if you haven't listened to it before, I would definitely recommend this one for sure because it's basically the mission statement of the podcast. And, yeah, lots to come. I got stuff all tentatively planned. My life's super busy. I moved back to Chicago, and my job's busy. So tentatively, I'm planning whole season. I can do it. For reasons I'll disclose throughout the 4 days of introduction. I'll kind of use that as my. I was gonna do some sort of like state of the podcast address, but I'm not going to do that because I can just do it in between on the intros and outros and these things. Anyways, here is the first stage of the 4 days of introduction, and I'll recap afterwards. Four days of introduction. Stage 1. When cycling was king. After hearing rumors of its existence for several years, I began to watch the Tour de France regularly when Mark Cavendish was at the peak of his powers. I loved seeing the Manx missile dominate the sprints, but I was quickly drawn to the overall general classification, the GC battles for the coveted Maillot Jaune, the yellow jersey awarded to the Tour champion. In that era, I remember the top men mixing it up in the mountains were Andy and Frank Schleck, Alberto Contador, and Cadel Evans. But alas, away at summer camps, I missed most of the famous duels. In the Pyrenees, the young and mighty Andy Schleck versus the wily and tricksy Alberto Contador, and the prime of life, who rode away in Chaingate. Or in another edition, I heard of Schleck's exploits in the Alps, trying to find separation from Cadel Evans on the High Glibier and beloved Alpe d'Huez, but ultimately, it was not enough for Schleck to take victory overall. I did not see these battles, but to hear them described was perhaps more powerful. My imagination was allowed to run wild once more, as it did when I first heard the rumor of this tour's existence. I thought about the stamina, the fitness, and the guts it takes to ride all the way around France. And yet, the race can still come down to one last decisive mountain stage. One last mountain. One last chance to attack for overall victory. Hearing about the final Pyrenean battles, I could not envision Andy Schleck and Alberto Contador as only cyclists racing up a mountain. I imagined famous boxers in the ring trading blows for the world heavyweight title. Each attack, surges of pace up the steep gradient climbs trying to distance the other rider, was an attempt to crack the rival and land the knockout punch. And yet, the rival was up for the challenge, counterattacking himself, trying to deal a knockout punch as well. In my head, that 2010 tour of Schleck vs. Contador is the gold standard of going toe-to-toe, pedal stroke for pedal stroke. For 2, maybe even 3 days, they battled on in the misty, rain-soaked Pyrenees while the rabid fans cheered them on, up and down the famous climbs. I love, too, the idea that that tour ended in infamy. Only Schleck's chain drop amid the ascent of the Portobello's climb could separate them. Villainous Contador took advantage of the Schleck misfortune, no fault of his own, and rode away to victory overall in that tour. And the years following, much controversy surrounds that tour. Contador was stripped of that title for doping and seemed even more the villain. But as I learned more and more about the sport, I didn't have the full story at the time. Apparently, Contador was in the midst of an attack when Schleck's chain dropped. Remember, as I said, I did not see this myself. I was only hearing secondhand accounts of the stage. I only saw quick snippet highlights of their round-for-round, scorching attacks and counterattacks. What rightly happened, or what I had only heard happened, has mostly faded from my memory too, and that is fine with me. I now refuse to watch the full replays of those Pyrenean stages because I do not want to relearn exactly what happened. I prefer my own idolized and epic imagined images of those days of yore. You see, the images I have stored up in my memory resemble a true and proper clash of titans. Ever since that 2010 tour, epic clashes, duels, and showdowns is the lens with which I have viewed the sport of cycling. In my eyes, the most famous battles in cycling shake the foundations of the world like when Zeus and the Olympians subdued Kronos and the Titans. This is the sport about which ancient bards would wish to compose great epics. What one ancient bard would think of cycling shall be the subject of the next post, stage 2. But for now, let us look at what the modern-day bards once accomplished. Finally, in recent years, I have confirmed what I always thought must be the case. I am not the first to view cycling with such an epic lens. I tell you, for me, the peak of journalism came in the first half of the 20th century when sports reporters covering the biggest races made cycling the most popular sport in Europe by a long shot, selling newspapers filled with vivid accounts of heroic victors and classic duels by the truckload. With cycling's linear travel from point to point, none or few sports lend themselves more to the narrative storytelling medium. If you do not believe me, I dare someone tell me that a newspaper article recapping any remotely exciting football or basketball game was better than just watching the replay of the game itself. With cycling, the best races can be greatly enhanced in 20 different ways if 20 half-decent journalists set to work. I achieved this myself. My version of Schleck vs. Contador based on secondhand accounts is utterly epic, probably better than the real footage. But allow me to give another concrete example from cycling history. One of the most monumental days in the history of cycling was when Fausto Coppi decisively beat bitter arch rival Gino Bartoli once and for all on stage 17 of the 1949 Giro d'Italia from Cuneo to Pinerolo. Their rivalry captivated all of Italy, for these two represented the old and the new Italy. Every Italian was walking on pins and needles awaiting to hear the results of the stage. Mario Ferretti's opening radio line at the beginning of his commentary that started mid-stage is still arguably the greatest moment in Italian sports history. Un uomo solo alla comando, la sua maglia è bianco celeste, il suo nome è Fausto Coppi. One man alone is leading, his jersey is sky blue, and his name is Fausto Coppi. This race and the Coppi-Bartoli rivalry in general shall surely be the spotlight of multiple future posts. But for now, I dare share a dirty secret. This actual race itself, from Cuneo to Pinerolo, must have been a relatively dull affair. Over an extremely mountainous 254-kilometer stage, Fausto Coppi broke away early on, stringing the whole peloton out behind. He ended up beating second place on the stage, Gino Bartoli, by a whopping 9 minutes. It was a proper thrashing. There is no way it could have been as exciting as the evenly matched Schleck Contador duels of the 2010 tour. But that is until the journalists set to work to help us properly understand what a feat had just transpired. They set about crafting the compelling narrative that correctly sets this day as the crown jewel in this greatest rivalry. I present now the opening excerpt of Dino Buzzati's Corriere della Sera newspaper article treating the events of the stage. Today, ascending the Izoard's terribly steep incline, we saw Bartoli set off in solo pursuit with furious thrusts of the pedals, spatter with mud, the corners of his lips turned down in a grimace expressing all his body's and soul's suffering. Copy went by quite a while before, and by now he was climbing the final slopes of the pass. There was reborn in us, after 30 years, a feeling that we have never forgotten. 30 years ago, that is to say, when we learned that Hector had been slain by Achilles. Is such a comparison too solemn, too glorious? No. What use would the so-called classical studies be if the fragments that remained with us did not become an integral part of our humble existence? Fausto Coppi certainly does not have Achilles' icy cruelty. On the contrary, of the two champions, he is without a doubt the more cordial and likable. But Bartoli, even if he is more aloof and gruff, however unknowingly, lives in the same drama as Hector, the drama of a man destroyed by the gods. The Trojan hero finds he is fighting against Athena herself, and he was destined to succumb. It's against a superhuman power that Bartoli fought, and he could do nothing but lose. The evil power of age. So saith Buzzati. Buzzati and all of Italy knew the significance of the rivalry to the point he needed not even stress it in his account. All knowing this was the decisive duel between Coppi and Bartoli, what could be a more appropriate comparison than invoking the ultimate duel? The Coppi Achilles and Bartoli Hector references continue the entire article, including 3 quotations of verse straight from the Iliad itself. Buzzati describes the elegance and power of Coppi while still paying homage to old Bartoli, a stubborn, star-crossed hero still fighting the good fight that he is doomed to lose. But allow me one more quote, for Buzzati explicitly says what I have contended for the length of this article as he is about to describe Coppi's initial attack. Hundreds of thousands of Italians would have paid who knows how much to be up there where we were, to see what we were seeing. For years and years, we realized there would be endless talk about this small occurrence that in itself did not seem to be of special importance. Merely a man on a bicycle who was pulling away from his traveling companions. And yet in that instant, and don't laugh, on the side of the road, irresistibly came to pass what the ancients used to call destiny. So spoke Buzzati again. Yes, Buzzati admits he is only covering a bike race, and one of the men has just made a simple attack. But in the same breath, just as the 2010 Tour was for me, he stresses how much more than a bike race it is. All Italians want his front row seat in the caravan of cars. Here is a battle that shall be spoken of in revered terms for decades to come. It was a date with destiny. At the reading of Coppi Achilles and Bartoli Hector, I breathed a deep sigh of contentment and joy to know such glorious accounts of cycling are in existence. I dare say no finely balanced Spanish, English, German, or even Brazilian World Cup final can compete with this. Yes, this is when cycling was king. But today, in a world where sport is consumed on far-seeing televisions, cycling is king no longer, supplanted by many more TV-friendly sports. In a world of instantaneous information in our pockets and where cuckoo birds tweet their days away, the rich journalistic tradition of cycling has markedly declined as well. Perhaps I look not hard enough for good writing, and sincerely I hope this is the case. But I fear this modern age is not wired for the slow-burning races, even with their exciting finales. And yet, I remember combining the pieces I saw and the pieces I heard of the 2010 Tour and how my imagination produced such a thrilling race based on the simple idea that the Grand Tours are the epics of modern-day myth. And then I looked at writings of people like Dino Buzzati, and I see a blueprint of how to stress and expound the gravitas of this sport. And so here I am. Why not set out to follow in the footsteps of the giant journalists from cycling's golden age? A bicycle race can be exciting and fantastic alone by itself for the dedicated fans who see more than just men in tights riding bikes. But in the sport's best days, the race's dramas were massaged to perfection by journalists, epic accounts, and all the masses were cycling fans, reading about the living legends with eager anticipation after every big race. I can only ever hope to have a fraction of the skill of the great journalists of yore and epic poets of old that have chronicled the deeds of eternal fame. But now I shall try my hand and make my own contribution, however small. Thus, I pray God give me wit and ability to create accounts of the cycling races that are epic enough to stir the heart and body, clever enough to please and satisfy the mind, and moving enough to occasionally pierce the soul. Perhaps now, too, this modern age may be ready for such accounts of cycling again. Look at how we have unexpectedly reverted back to the oral tradition of ancients in healthy fashion, albeit in digital form. Thus I come with not only written accounts, but scripted narration as well as it was in podcasting's infancy. Thus my purposes are revealed. Thus is given the mission statement. Soon we shall speak of the feats of great fame, past and present, these cycling epics. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that. I realized, here's the thing, doing this a year later, Cav at the peak of his powers. Maybe that's out of date now, huh? I don't know. To toot my own horn too, I gotta say, I really just charged into that Italian line so fearlessly head on that unless you know Italian, you probably can't tell how much I inevitably butchered that pronunciation. And then the excerpts that I read from, just to be clear, give credit to the writers here. I was reading from Dino Buzzati's 1949 Giro d'Italia, Coppi versus Bartoli at the 1949 Tour of Italy, and those excerpts were from pages 161 to 163. Okay? So when I re-listened to this, I was actually pretty surprised how much I went for it in this one. Like, it really is me laying out everything there. Like, I'm laying it all out. This is really why I'm doing the show. A year since writing this, can't really say much has even changed, actually, so I guess that's good. Hopefully people are picking up. I'm attempting to echo fake kind of Homeric style or epic writing style, right? Hopefully that's obvious. Kind of think like the epicness of the faux Shakespearean style of Charlton Heston's 10 Commandments. Great movie. It's not supposed to be taken too seriously. Hopefully that made you chuckle. Like, if it didn't, then I definitely failed at my job. Maybe if I did a very good job, it actually got your blood plumping a little bit. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. That's the goal anyways. So you're seeing my progression as I go forward, or lack thereof of progression too, and maybe you just stop listening. Anyways, I didn't re-record the next 3 stages of the introduction. They kind of just barely passed my threshold that, all right, this is fine. I'm just gonna reuse it because I don't have infinite amounts of time to work on this thing, you know? So over the next couple episodes, at the beginning and end of them, I'll try to lay out what I'm envisioning for basically just the next month of the podcast, but then the whole season, you know, all of 2022. So yeah, just stay tuned. Lots more to come. Follow me on Twitter, Cycling Odysseys. Find the email, or send me an email with any show ideas that you have, or anything else, to cyclingodysseys@gmail.com. Find the blog post at cyclingodysseys.com. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for listening. Vive le cyclisme.